Hello, this video is going to give an overview of Fusion Palettes. There are several articles on the CafeX support portal that cover the installation of palettes and its integration into various call center environments, and the required software is available from the CafeX download server. Let's start with a quick introduction to Fusion Palettes. Palettes extends the call center into the hands of the consumer. What we mean by that is that using a variety of client-side APIs, enterprises can build client applications that can collect a whole host of customer-specific contextual data and have that passed via a HTTP interface through to palettes, which in turn will communicate with the appropriate back-end call center environment. So examples of the data these client applications can collect would be something like how long the customer has been on the website, which pages they've visited, and how long they've been on each page, and basically anything else that can help best service the customer once they initiate contact with the enterprise. Let's now look at the different components required to build up a palette solution. To start with, the palette server is deployed onto the FAS. In order for the palette server to communicate with a back-end call center environment, it requires the use of a call center specific adapter, and the configuration for that adapter is defined within a service configuration component. We then have the enterprise's web application, which will serve up content to the customer. Let's take a quick look at what happens when we deploy an adapter or a service configuration component onto the palette server. So every time a service configuration component or an adapter is deployed to palettes, palettes will try and associate the two together. When a service configuration component is deployed, it will register an application ID, a service name, and an adapter type that its configuration relates to. And similarly, when an adapter is deployed, it will define itself as being a particular adapter type. So it's only when these two components are deployed together that palettes marries up the two components and offers up the services defined by the configuration to its clients. So when a client application wants to communicate with palettes, a new instance of an adapter is created. Palettes then generates a URL for the clients to access the adapter specifically in order to communicate with the appropriate back-end call center. Now let's see how palettes offers the appropriate service to its clients. Fusion Palettes defines two interfaces. The first allows palettes to retrieve some data from the back-end call center environment, such as the estimated wait time for a particular agent queue, and the other is to allow palettes to set customer-specific call context data into the call center environment. As we saw before, in order for palettes to communicate with a back-end call center, it needs an adapter. There are several adapters that come packaged within palettes. The first allows integration into a Genesis backend. Then there are adapters to integrate into a UCCE environment. There are two adapters, one specifically implementing the Get145 interface, and the ringback adapter which implements the Get125 interface. And finally, there's a UCCX adapter. Then we come to the service configuration component, which is a WAR file deployed to the FAS. It contains a web XML, which defines an application name. An application is a logical representation within palettes of the association between the adapter and the service configuration component. Also within the WAR file, there's a services XML file which defines the adapter that this configuration relates to, the service that this application will expose. The adapter may implement both the retrieve data and the set call context data interfaces. However, this particular application that's being defined here may only expose one of the interfaces. And finally, the services XML also defines a unique service name within palettes for that service. So what does a palettes client need to do in order to interact with palettes? Well, to start with, it needs to initialize an application. To do this, it calls palettes.init and passes in an application name and a service name. Palettes will return an object which will be an instance of the adapter based on the application name that the client requested. The client then simply invokes that particular service, whether it's the retrieve data service or the set call context data service, passing in its required key value paired data. The appropriate adapter will then get invoked and then appropriately communicate with the backend call center environment to perform the required action. So now that we understand the inner workings of pallets, let's look at an example call flow. So as we saw before, the service configuration component and the adapter have already been deployed. So to start with, the customer navigates to the enterprise's web application. The appropriate website is displayed. The customer then begins to navigate around the website. In the background, the web app is continually collecting contextual data about the customer. The customer may need to log in at some point, in which case the customer's ID then gets associated with this contextual data. At some point, the customer will want to contact an agent within the call center. When they initiate contact, as we saw earlier, the client application will go off to pallets, ask for an adapter that it can communicate with. Once it retrieves that, the application will then send the customer collected data to the adapter, which will then communicate with the appropriate call center application. Typically, the customer may then be required to dial into the contact center. Once that call hits the contact center, the customer's contextual data that was posted through pallets earlier will then be married up with the telephony call that's come in and be presented to the agent. This is a typical example of an IVR bypass call flow. So the idea being, once this customer has actually reached an agent, the agent already has all of the contextual data necessary to service that customer as best as possible. In a nutshell, that's pallets. Thank you for watching. Check out our support portal for more helpful guides.